Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Shri Kodanatai Mayapur Shashi ki, Shri Tulsinath Maharaj ki, Shri Giridhar Lal ki, Srimati Vrindadevi ki, Shri Nrsimhadev Bhagavan ki, Prantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. Vishnu Christmas to the Srimad Shri Ram Svatana Vishnu Christmas to the Sri Bhakti. So continuing to read from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, please distribute books. That Srila Prabhupada had completed the entire Chaitanya Charitamrita manuscript in 18 months during 1973 and 1974 was a remarkable feat. In those same months, he had been intensely engaged in many affairs of management while constantly traveling. He had confronted major problems with leaders who had left their posts. He had personally attended to GBC duties in India, and he had dealt with other ISKCON managerial affairs. He had authorized many large BBT loans and had approved the expansion and development of ISKCON in all areas of the world, in addition to responding regularly to large volumes of mail, speaking daily to guests, and giving Bhagavatam lectures wherever he went. His only time for writing had been on arising at 1 a.m, and he had persistently worked 2 or 3 hours each day. While Srila Prabhupada traveled from Vrindavan to Australia, Rameshwara and Radhavallabha worked in Los Angeles to establish the new BBT offices. Prabhupada was still meditating on his completed Chaitanya Charitamrita manuscript waiting to be published. From Australia, he wrote, "The Chaitanya Charitamrita is complete, 12 parts, and only 3 parts are published, and now the 5th canto is almost finished. So why these books are not being published? This is our first business. Immediately these pending books, 17 in total, must all be published. Why the delay? The US printer's binding is better than Dai Nippon. So some may be printed in the US and some in Japan, but the pending books must be finished in a very short time. When I see so many books pending, it does not encourage me to translate. When I see books printed, I become encouraged to write more and more. We can talk this over more in Hawaii. Now you and Hang Sadhuta expedite the publishing work. This is your business, and push on the selling. You request Tripurari Maharaj in this connection along with others. Now Bhavananda Swami and Gargamuni are there. They are also expert in pushing this on. By combined effort, publish as quickly as possible, and immediately Chaitanya Charitamrita should be done. Srila Prabhupada ki. What verse is it? Which verse? Chapter 5. Yeah. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 5, chapter entitled Lord Rishabhadev's Teachings. Text 2. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So these verses from the beginning of chapter 5, Srila Prabhupada gave classes on these verses. And actually around the time that we're speaking from Chaitanya Prabhupada's Lilamrita, he was just mentioning there that he was just writing the 5th canto of Bhagavatam. So Srila Prabhupada gave classes on these verses many times, not just when he was translating them, but he often chose these verses to give class on. And actually, has anyone read the transcriptions of Srila Prabhupada's Srimad Bhagavatam lectures? John, have you read those? No? All right, well, there's something to look forward to anyway. So we've got transcriptions of these classes, and there's 3 or 4 classes on each verse. They're very important verses which Srila Prabhupada quotes throughout his books and lectures. So text 2. Mahatsevam Dwaram Ahur Vimuktes Mahatsevam Dwaram Ahur Vimuktes Tamo Dwaram Yoshitam Sangi Sangam Tamodwaram Yoshitam Sangi Sangam Mahantas Te Samachita Prashanta Mahantas Te Samachita Prashanta Vimanyava Surida Sadhavo Ye Vimanyava Surida Sadhavo Ye Mahat Sevam Dwaramahu Vimuktes Tamo Dwaram Yoshitam Sangi Sangam Mahantaste Samachita Prashanta Vimanyava Surida Sadhavo Ye Mahatsevam Dwaramahu Vimuktes Tamo Dwaram Yoshitam Sangi Sangam Mahantaste Samachita Prashanta Himanyava Surida Sadhavo Ye
Mahatsevam Dwaram Ahur Vimuktes Tamodvaram Yoshitam Sangi Sangam
Dwaram Yoshitam Sangi Sangam
Mahantaste
Mahantaste samachita prashanta Vimanyava surita sadavoye Mahatsevam dvaramaho vimuktes Tamo dvaram yoshiti sangi sangam Mahantaste samachita prashanta Vimanyava surita sadavoye. Masteries. Mahatsevam dvaramaho vimuktes Tamo dvaram yoshitam sangi sangam Mahantaste samachita prashanta Vimanyava surita sadavoye Mahatsevam dvaramaho vimuktes Tamo dvaram yoshitam sangi sangam Mahantaste samachita prashanta Vimanyava surita sadavoye Mahatsevam. Service to the spiritually advanced persons called Mahatmas. Dwaram, the way. Ahu, they say. Vimukte, of liberation. Tamadwaram, the way to the dungeon of a dark, hellish condition of life. Yoshitam, of women. Sangi, of associates. Sangam, association. Mahanta, highly advanced in spiritual understanding. Te, they. Samachita, persons who see everyone in a spiritual identity. Prashanta, very peaceful, situated in Brahman or Bhagavan. Vimanyava, without anger. One must distribute Krishna consciousness to persons who are hostile without becoming angry at them. It's amazing. Surida, well-wishers of everyone. Sadhava, qualified devotees, without abominable behavior. Yea, they who. Translation by Srila Prabhupada ki. One can attain the path of liberation from material bondage only by rendering service to highly advanced spiritual personalities. These personalities are impersonalists and devotees. Whether one wants to merge into the Lord's existence or wants to associate with the personality of Godhead, one should render service to the Mahatmas. For those who are not interested in such activities, who associate with people fond of women and sex, the path to hell is wide open. The Mahatmas are equipoised. They do not see any difference between one living entity and another. They are very peaceful and are fully engaged in devotional service. They are devoid of anger, and they work for the benefit of everyone. They do not behave in any abominable way. Such people are known as Mahatmas. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. The human body is like a junction One may either take the path of liberation or the path leading to a hellish condition. How one can take these paths is described herein. On the path of liberation, one associates with Mahatmas, and on the path of bondage, one associates with those attached to sense gratification and women. There are two types of Mahatmas, the impersonalist and the devotee. Although their ultimate goal is different, the process of emancipation is almost the same. Both want eternal happiness. One seeks happiness in impersonal Brahman, and the other seeks happiness in the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As described in the first verse, Brahma Sokyam. Brahman means spiritual or eternal. Both the impersonalist and the devotee seek eternal blissful life. In any case, it is advised that one become perfect. In the words of Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 2287, Asat Sangha Tyaga E Vaishnavacha, Sri Sangi Eka Sadhu, Krishna Bhakta A. To remain unattached to the modes of material nature, one should avoid associating with those who are asat, materialistic. There are two kinds of materialists. One is attached to women and sense gratification, and the other is simply a non-devotee. On the positive side is association with Mahatmas, and on the negative side is the avoidance of non-devotees and women hunters. Amajnana timirandasya gyananjana shalakaya chakshuranmalitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupkadamayam Dadati Swapatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganitan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shiva Shakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanshakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So as I say, these verses are very important verses, and as I'm definitely not a Mahatma, and not on a very high platform of devotional service, so I definitely recommend that you listen to some of Srila Prabhupada's classes on these verses while we're reading through them. In your spare time, if you're doing any service that allows you to listen to Srila Prabhupada, then this is a really nice time to listen to these lectures. I'll read the translation again. One can attain the path of liberation from material bondage only by rendering service to highly advanced spiritual personalities. These personalities are impersonalists and devotees. Whether one wants to merge into the Lord's existence or wants to associate with the personality of Godhead, one should render service to the Mahatmas. For those who are not interested in such activities, who associate with people fond of women and sex, the path to hell is wide open. The Mahatmas are equipoised. They do not see any difference between one living entity and another. They are very peaceful and are fully engaged in devotional service. They are devoid of anger and they work for the benefit of everyone. They do not behave in any abominable way. Such people are known as Mahatmas. So that's interesting. Now, the very first sentence of the purport: the human body is like a junction. One may either take the path of liberation or the path leading to a hellish condition. Now, I don't know if anyone's seen in one of the older editions of Bhagavad Gita. I think it's in the Great Classics edition, and probably in a few of the older editions of Bhagavad Gita. there's a very nice picture describing this junction, and it's a staircase, and it's a staircase leading to Goloka Vrindavan, and at the top of the staircase, Radha and Krishna are on a throne, and then the other staircase leads down to the lower planetary systems, and it also leads down to like very ugra karma activities. And then in the middle, of course, is the human being, ourself. We're in the middle, on the middle of rung of that staircase. So at every moment, we have an opportunity to choose to go up one step. One step. It may seem very daunting task to go up like a few steps at a time sometimes, especially when our mind is reminding us of the times that we've gone down the steps, and the mind has a tendency to want to take the easy route, actually, because the mind always needs to be directed. It's like the mind is like a child who's always just looking for immediate sense gratification. So if we don't engage the mind positively in taking us a baby step upwards, so the mind can only take baby steps by it, and so therefore just asking the mind, okay, just step up, just take one step up, and then the next moment another step up, like that. And in the course of our service, those steps may seem like the same steps all the time. We're asking the mind, okay, chant the next mantra attentively, chant the next mantra attentively, chant the next mantra attentively. So it may seem like we're not going up any steps at all. It may just seem like we're just going up and back down and up and back down and up and back down and up and back down. And that may be all that we can perceive. We may not have the level of purity and self-realization to perceive how the consciousness is actually going up all the time, as long as we make these baby steps one after another, one after another. Srila Prabhupada gives the example of a baby learning to walk, that the baby already within its nature, in the human nature, the ability to walk is already there. It's already, well, in modern terms, it's like hardwired into the brain. The process of working, the nerves that are connected from the brain to the spine and to the limbs, it's already set up there. But because the living entity has been born into a body which is not capable of walking for a year, and it has no memory of walking. The brain has no memory of walking. Or in that body, the brain has no memory of walking. So for the baby, it's like the baby needs encouragement at the beginning. It doesn't believe that it's possible that it's going to be able to walk because it doesn't have any experience in that life of walking. So similarly, because we've actually, probably all of us here have grown up in an environment where the norm is association with persons attached to sex and to women hunters and persons just attached to gratifying their senses. And because we haven't actually had the association of Mahatmas from the beginning of our lives, then we're still conditioned in this way that we don't perceive that we're going on the path back to Godhead. We don't actually perceive that in our daily life. But actually every step that we take forward, every time that we just decide to do our duty, on our duty is on a spiritual level, and chanting attentively, hearing, trying to remember instructions that we've received, and also on the level of our psychophysical nature, doing our duty to try and have a healthy discipline, practice our morning program. Not just the chanting, but also in terms of looking after our bodies well and perhaps doing some asanas and looking after our diet properly. So all of these things, even though sometimes due to the modes of nature and due to our physical health, it may seem that we're getting dragged down, but that's not actually, that's because we can't, as I say, as yet perceive the progress that we're making. So, so at every moment, it's good to remember that we're at a junction, and we just need to continue to take those baby steps upwards. So have a look at that picture. It's a great picture, actually. I recommend that if you haven't got a Bhagavad Gita that's got that picture in it, then get that picture somehow or other on your phone or on your computer or print it out. It's a really important picture. Actually, I'm reading at the moment a biography by Jamuna Devi Dasi, who is one of Srila Prabhupada's most dear and dedicated devotees. Srila Prabhupada trusted her with the deity worship of the deities in the Krishna Balaram temple and many other projects. He understood that she was a very advanced devotee. And you can see in her biography, especially in her time that she spent in Vrindavan, overseeing the installation of the deities and the arrangement for the deities, that she was an extremely advanced devotee with great dedication. And when you're reading that part of her biography, then well, not you, but when I read that part of her biography, it just seems like these were definitely demigods who came to help Srila Prabhupada, or these were definitely associates of Lord Chaitanya, and it's so much more difficult for me, and I couldn't imagine being able to undergo the austerities. Of course, they were a lot younger. Perhaps if I'd been in India with Srila Prabhupada when I was 21, 22 years old, perhaps I would have been able to rise to the occasion. But anyway, but then later in her biography, she talks about how she's trying to help young devotees. This is like 40 years on, perhaps, from when she was in India. Then, like 40 years later, when she's in New Vrindavan and in the Sharanagati community in Canada, then many young devotees who are perhaps children or grandchildren even of those her generation come to her for association for Vaishnavi Sanghas and for Bhajan Sanghas. And she's in her preaching to those devotees, she's just talking about making baby steps. And it's like, even though she's a Mahatma, definitely like a highly elevated devotee, but she's not looking down. She's not looking down. Or she's not becoming angry. Here it's talking about, Srila Prabhupada says, one must distribute Krishna consciousness to persons who are hostile without becoming angry at them. So sometimes young devotees become hostile because they have young devotees like me become hostile sometimes. So my hostile mind sometimes doesn't appreciate the instruction I'm receiving from my spiritual masters. And I may feel intimidated, or the devotees or young devotees may feel intimidated by the instructions that they receive, because they have a tendency to interpret them according to their conditioning. But at every time in our devotional life, we can always take a step up. Always, we can also just stay still and absorb our consciousness in the holy name. Generally, it's not considered a safe position to try to remain still. Just like Srila Prabhupada would sometimes say that it's not a safe environment to go by yourself into a secluded place and just sit down and try to chant. That actually, because you're not sufficiently advanced, you won't perceive how your mind is gradually being dragged into like tamagun. However, we can stay still for a little time and chant and just try to remember all of the nice interactions we've had with devotees. So this is what Jamuna Devi Dasi was doing. She was creating an environment in which young devotees who were still feeling a little afraid of the challenges of making advancement in devotional service. She was giving them the experience of powerful association, not just from herself, but also by encouraging them to learn bhajans by Narottam Das Thakur and by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and to read some of the books by these devotees, and to study Srila Prabhupada's books in the association of many devotees, in devotees on different levels. And in this way, it's nice to be in a community where we're close together and we can develop honest relationships, where we can speak to one another without feeling that we have to be somebody. So in this way, we can all help each other make those steps up the ladder back to the spiritual world. But here there is the spiritual world. Shri Shri Kodanatai Maipo Shashi Ki, Shri Tulsinath Maharaj Ki, Shri Giridhari Lal Ki, Shri Nrsimhadev Bhagavan Ki, Shri Mati Vrindadevi Ki, Srila Prabhupada Ki. So just as Ramananda was saying in his class on Govardhan Puja morning, that here we have Giriraj Maharaj, Shri Giridhari Lal, on the altar, who is actually, so here we actually have Govardhan Hill. So, we can always come into the temple room and just coming in at the temple room and looking at the deities and seeing the deities and just thinking and looking at the pictures of the Guru Parampara, this will help us remember instructions that we've received, and it will help us feel connected to this amazing spiritual family. So Srila Prabhupada is a unique devotee, even in our sampradaya of great acharyas, like Madhvacharya and Rupa Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He's a unique devotee, and like the way he's translated these books is very amazing. He's translating them for us. Undoubtedly, he's translating them for his disciples and for those devotees who are still very much part of the pioneering movement. For example, here in this in the synonyms here, he translates some of the translations here. So Prashanta, very peaceful, situated in Brahman or Bhagavan. Vimanyava, without anger. One must distribute Krishna consciousness to persons who are hostile without becoming angry at them. So, this is like right in the middle of the 70s when devotees were starting to get problems on the street in book distribution, as a lot of the temples were getting lots and lots of young devotees joining now. And then all of a sudden, like towns that had never had lots of really enthusiastic brahmacharis shaved up in dhotis, all of a sudden had like every day, maybe 5 or 6 brahmacharis in a town. And people were becoming hostile, undoubtedly. I mean, I had personal experience of that many times. And so here Srila Prabhupada is, taking a verse from the teachings of Lord Rishabdev, who's an incarnation of Krishna, and he's actually, you could say, changing the meaning. So he understood when Srila Prabhupada came on the Jaladuta from India to America, then he had this, when he was, at the time when he had a heart attack, then at that time he had a vision, or he said Krishna appeared to him, and Krishna was rowing the boat, and that all of the different incarnations were there on the boat, like rowing, or they were all like making sure that the boat was going to reach its destination. So we don't know, and it's not for us to speculate. But then, earlier in his life, Srila Rupa Goswami appeared to Srila Prabhupada in a dream, and Srila Bhakti Siddhanta appeared in a dream. So so the Acharyas chose Srila Prabhupada at some stage. They may have chosen him before he was born, or may have chosen him later when they saw how he was so surrendered to his Guru Maharaj. So Srila Prabhupada has this. He's the empowered representative of the whole Guru Parampara and of all of Krishna's incarnations. And Srila Prabhupada himself gave this example that, what's the chance of meeting a pure devotee in like the ocean of the material existence? And he gives this example that if there's a turtle, a baby turtle, like is abandoned and gets washed out to sea in a storm, and then it's drowning, and then it just like dying of like exhaustion, and then just at the time it comes to the surface of the vast ocean, there just happens to be, and this example is not from recent times where there's so much pollution and so much rubbish in the sea. This example is actually from an ancient example when there was very rarely any rubbish in the sea. So that just at the time of the turtle coming to the surface of the vast ocean, there just happens to be a little bit of wood broken off from a boat that's just floating around, and it's got a hole in it, and the turtle puts its head through that hole. So in this way, we've just happened to come into the material world at the time that this unique Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, has come to, take the most sublime and esoteric shastras like the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Nectar of Devotion, and just give them to whoever he comes in contact with. So like whoever Srila Prabhupada came in contact with for a few moments, then that person was like transformed immediately by that contact. And we also are in that family, and we also have all been transformed. There's no doubt about it. And so we can, tomorrow is a very nice day, the disappearance, celebrating and observing the disappearance day of Srila Prabhupada. So when we watch the lecture, if we watch the film, the final lesson of everyone there, all of Srila Prabhupada's senior disciples and many others at Srila Prabhupada's bedside, then we can feel that we're also there, because we have the fortune of being in the generation who knows personally many of these disciples of Srila Prabhupada. So, we may be struggling in so many ways with our minds. Basically, that's the real struggle, is we're struggling with our minds. But we've got association of very steady devotees who are, many of Srila Prabhupada's disciples have really, really studied his books exhaustively, and they understand that all of the teachings of the Goswamis and the Guru Parampara are there in Srila Prabhupada's books. But because Srila Prabhupada was simultaneously trying to teach people on all levels, not just for now, but for the next 10,000 years, like he says, his books are the law books for mankind for the next 10,000 years. So here's an example of a verse which is written by Rishabdev, so that the Sanskrit and the translation by Srila Prabhupada will be applicable for the next 10,000 years. But in the purport, and even in the synonyms, Srila Prabhupada has given some instruction just for that time. And now we've got the responsibility of transmitting this knowledge of Srila Prabhupada to the next generations. Yes, these books are like completely authorized and completely true to the Guru Parampara, going back thousands of years, going back yugas, even going back to the teachings of Krishna to Lord Brahma. They're completely faithful. Srila Prabhupada never changed anything. And he's not changing anything here either. But because he understands the purpose, then he can elaborate it in such a way that gives us a deeper understanding. So, for example, there are two types of Mahatmas, the impersonalist and the devotee. So you might think, well, Srila Prabhupada, why does Srila Prabhupada say the impersonalist are Mahatmas? Because although most of them, 99% of the population are Naradamas, Srila Prabhupada says in Kali Yuga, 99.9% of the population are Naradamas. And so he was preaching to Naradamas. But now some of those Naradamas have become Mahatmas, and impersonalists, impersonal yoga teachers, impersonalist acharyas in India are now actually taking instruction from the spiritual masters in ISKCON. So in this way, Srila Prabhupada understands that ISKCON will become the means to preach Krishna consciousness to the whole world. And that also means the other sampradayas. It even means like the Shaktas and the Shaivites. Because the teachings of the Goswamis and the teachings of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, they brought many people from those Shaivites, Shaktas, into the Guru Parampara of Madhvacharya and Lord Chaitanya. Srila Prabhupada advised his disciples in the beginning not to try to do that because they weren't sufficiently learned and they weren't sufficiently pure. But now those devotees are doing that. So much so that actually like one of the acharyas of the Madhvacharya Sampradaya actually recommended that his disciples like honor Srila Prabhupada on Srila Prabhupada's appearance day and Srila Prabhupada's disappearance days. And many yoga teachers and many teachers of Ayurveda and many of the ancient Vedic sciences as they're represented today in India are now accepting Srila Prabhupada. So we just have to do our little duty by keeping positive and being good representatives of Srila Prabhupada. One of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's most famous disciples, Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj, who actually was one of the main inspirations that brought Radhanath Maharaj to reside in Vrindavan. And he was famous throughout the Gaudiya Math for his wonderful kirtan and for his deep absorption in the holy name. And he actually played the mridanga for the kirtan after Srila Prabhupada's disappearance. It was very dear to Srila Prabhupada, Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj. So Bibi Govinda Maharaj, Bhakti Bringa Govinda Maharaj had some association with him. And Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj actually said to Bhakti Bringa Govinda Maharaj that Srila Prabhupada is the greatest Vaishnava Acharya ever to have lived. And in the Sampradaya and in the Gaudiya Sampradaya. So Bhakti Bringa Govinda Maharaj was very surprised because he was a disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta. And he asked him, why is that? Why do you say that? And Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj said, because he's like delivered the holy name, throughout the world. No one else has done this. So we've all come in contact with Srila Prabhupada by great good fortune, and we can, be enthusiastic in all of our attempts to serve the highly advanced spiritual personalities who are following in the footsteps of Srila Prabhupada. So I'll stop there. Are there any questions or comments? Grantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaura Premanandi, Anantakoti Vaishnavrinda ki jai.